There was an incident on a Washington State highway where a semi-truck trailer burst into flames. The cause? Lithium-ion batteries. I had a chance to speak with a hazmat technician from Washington State who shared some eye-opening details about the incident. Here today I have Chris Pfaff from hazmatandrescue.com. He's a fire instructor and hazmat technician in Washington State. Not only did he witness this incident, but he also has a lot of contacts at local agencies that dealt with this incident. So, Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about this incident and what you know?
On July 9th, Eastside Fire and Rescue responded to a semi-truck trailer on Interstate 90 westbound. This was for a trailer that was leaving Spokane, Washington, and delivering products to Seattle, Washington. As they were coming down Snoqualmie Pass, the truck driver identified some white vapors coming out of the trailer, knew that this was a potential indicator for a lithium-ion battery event, pulled over on the side of the freeway, disconnected his tractor from the trailer, and then he proceeded to call 911. Eastside Fire and Rescue responded rather quickly, and the hazmat team was attached to the first alarm response. While there, the incident commander ended up working about 50 to 100 feet away from the trailer, and they were working on offensively fighting and extinguishing this fire, which at that time they did not know was holding lithium-ion batteries. There were no placards in it, and at that time they had not obtained the bill of lading. So they were attacking it just like a traditional structure fire or traditional semi-truck trailer fire. It was at that time an explosion occurred from the release of the vapors that were contained within the lithium-ion batteries, blowing the back doors pretty much off. And the quote that we ended up getting from the incident commander is, "I've never seen something flex that much." And we were asking if it was the drums or anything else. It was literally the walls of the trailer that had bowed on out. So this was a deflagration event with some serious magnitude. He upgraded the response at that time, and there was probably a couple thousand gallons of water applied. The responders and the hazmat technicians on the scene at that time, they were able to get at least the information on what was being shipped. Now, the shipper, they have offices in Spokane, in Seattle, and in Kent, Washington, respectively, and they end up doing remediation of recycled materials for e-cycling. They do not do battery recycling in any way, shape, or form, and they do not go and collect. They end up taking delivery of e-cycle waste to go distribute it and send it into other places. Batteries have kind of become one of those extra things because a lot of people are considering lithium-ion batteries part of e-cycling waste. So they still do not have their plans set up at this point. When we look at the bill of lading, and the hazmat tech was identifying this, there were a lot of fluorescent light bulbs that were in the front of the trailer. There were nickel metal hydride batteries. There were lead acid batteries. There were lithium-ion batteries and overpacks with cell block properly shipped and labeled. And then there were pallets of loose lithium-ion batteries at the back of the trailer. Those are the batteries that are in question that ended up going into their thermal runaway and caused this initial explosion.
And we've seen batteries shipped like this catch on fire multiple times before, and a lot of it has to do with the packaging. You've got these loose batteries either in drums or they're palletized in these large cardboard boxes. The weight of the batteries on top of each other, they compress the batteries, they can cause damage, mechanical damage, and cause fire. Or because of the way they're bouncing around inside the container, or they're not protected, the terminals aren't protected, they can short out and cause fires. So this is really a hazard, and again, we've seen it multiple times. So overall, how long was the fire department on scene?
Eastside Fire and Rescue was there on scene for about 3 hours initially for this call, applying a couple thousand gallons of water, like I said before. They had to recover a lot of the batteries off of the highway of Interstate 90, and then they ended up using overpacks that were provided by the shipper to overpack about a third of a 55-gallon drum with batteries, cell block, and making sure that that was safe. They handed all of that back over to the shipper so then they could deliver that to its final termination in Seattle. At that time, they pretty much cleared scene. Other representatives from Washington State Patrol, Washington Department of Ecology were contacted, and they went through the entire step process to make sure that the public was safe as well as the responders were safe.
Just to touch on something you mentioned earlier, one of the challenges right now, there's no good way to know what's inside of these semi-trucks. You said there was no placards on the outside of that vehicle, and that's because there's no real system in place right now to placard lithium-ion batteries. Is that pretty accurate?
I've been speaking specifically to the Department of Transportation about this issue. DDR batteries, no matter how many you have on a vessel, on a container, on any type of DOT shipping paper, they do not need to be placarded on the exterior of the vessel. That would be the DOT Class 9, the miscellaneous hazard. The label on the actual non-bulk containers does have to be in place. So if we have a 55-gallon drum or a pallet of batteries, there needs to be a label inside the container. However, on the exterior of that vessel, they do have a specific exemption within DOT where they do not need to have a placard in any way, shape, or form.
It's really unfortunate because, for example, this situation could have been deadly. We had firefighters on scene fighting the fire, and then you've got a deflagration, an explosion. And this isn't the first time this has happened. We've got, at least in the last few years, over a dozen different explosions involving semi-trucks due to these DDR batteries. And just so everybody knows, DDR, damaged, defective, or recalled batteries.
And it's an important point that you speak about there as well, Patrick. This tractor trailer and this fire occurred at least about 20 miles east of Seattle in the greater Seattle region. However, in its continuous route, if it would have carried on, it would have gone through at least 2 tunnels to make it to the end termination. And there's some restricted routes in our larger inner cities like Seattle, Washington, where hazardous materials cannot be transported. If there's a placard on the exterior, it's pretty easy for a state patrolman to identify that they are transporting this on an illegal path of travel. However, with there being no placards on the exterior of this vessel, it looks just like a normal consumer commodity carrier, and they can get through. Even though they're breaking the law, they can get through without representatives being notified.
Yeah, and that can cause some major issues, not only for the local jurisdiction, but for the fire department, for everybody involved. We're in a situation where that could cause a loss of life eventually here. And these types of fires are occurring fairly frequently. Just in the last couple of months, we had one in Georgia. We had one in Michigan, my home state. The biggest issue is we're not tracking these types of incidents, and it's very difficult to even find out about them unless you're really searching for them.
And that's the big thing, Patrick. A lot of these events look, at least according to the news, they look like a minor event. It's just a semi-truck fire that might make the blip on the 6 o'clock evening news for about 5 minutes, 20 minutes into the show. It's not that catastrophic of an event, at least what the news media sees. If we end up losing a firefighter or some civilians, it will turn into a much larger event. And that's where the biggest thing that a lot of authorities have in jurisdiction, a lot of bodies out there are trying to push against. We do not want to lose firefighters. Really quickly, when I was talking to my Washington State Patrol representatives, one of the biggest reasons why I'm trying to push this out is because of the Kansas City Fire 6. Back in the 70s, 6 firefighters ended up losing their life because they offensively fought a tractor trailer fire. The trailer was in the middle of a yard, and it was carrying, I think it was dynamite. But there was no placards on the exterior because the owners were worried about the dynamite getting stolen. Placards, people will be able to know that there's dynamite. So they removed the placards, and then a subsequent arson fire, I think it was. Don't quote me exactly on that. But unfortunately, what happened is they ended up attacking this fire in an offensive fashion, having catastrophic results from it, which that unfortunate result changed to the DOT requiring placards on these containers, whether they're being shipped or whether they're being parked at every single time. The last thing I want to see is a firefighter being killed or a civilian being killed, which will motivate DOT and FEMSA to change that law. Hopefully we can have that change prior to that.
Yeah, and it seems like it takes an act of Congress sometimes to get these types of changes through. Realistically, we need some type of placarding system, not only for your clean, your newly manufactured lithium-ion batteries, but also a separate one for the DDR. I really think we need stronger regulations on how we're transporting these DDR batteries because they have been causing some major issues.
Well, and that goes into the waste management fires and the wrecking yard fires that we're seeing increase across the country. Ryan Folgerman from Fire Rover has a lot of research on that with his tools and his tactics. But, and this is anecdotal, but I've seen a ton more wrecking yard fires and waste yard fires. Right now, with EVs or with any type of consumer commodities or any of our lithium-ion batteries, they're getting into that range that they're finally hitting their end of lifespan. And we're seeing this tsunami of these DDR batteries having to be retired and shipped and disposed of in an appropriate location. There are a lot of recycling facilities that are working on spooling up the tools to recycle these in a safe and effective manner. However, getting them from a location to that recycler Right now, making sure we have proper placards and proper regulations to ensure that these are safely done right now, it seems to be lacking. And you are correct that it will take a literal act of Congress, unfortunately, to change some of this.
With the situation we were just talking about, your incident over in Washington, it didn't end on the side of the highway.
That's correct, Patrick. And really quickly, the day of the event, that trailer rekindled one more time 3 hours later when they were actually trying to remove the battery from the trailer from the freeway. They got it about 1,000 feet down the road, and then the reignition occurred, probably most likely from the vibration, the shaking, water contamination, shorting, other things like that. So they started seeing venting. They pulled back to the side of the road again, called East Side Fire and Rescue. Another 12 hours later, they ended up having another reignition of that trailer on the side of the freeway. It was 24 hours later that trailer was finally shipped and stored and secured enough for them to actually begin the transit. And ironically enough, I was coming from Spokane, Washington, back to the west side of Washington where I live. And I decided to go past the site. I did not see the trailer or the cleanup crew at that time. It took me a long time because I was in heavy rush hour traffic in the afternoon. But by about 8:30 in the evening, when I was on my way home, I literally caught up to the trailer with a very good escort of the tow company, I want to at least add. They were actually getting off the freeway at that time with the trailer in very bad condition. I could see that the final batteries had been tarped with a blue tarp wrapped over it at the back of the trailer. They had a front escort and they had a back escort. Luckily, I was able to identify the name of the tower, and I knew the location where that wrecking yard was, which is 6 fire districts away from where this initial location was. 30 miles. It drove through all of these different jurisdictions on major highways during rush hour traffic. I called the fire marshal of this second fire department and decided and gave him the heads up to inform his battalion chiefs, their shift commanders, that, hey, you guys have a battery that could potentially go into thermal runaway because it had 3 times on one of our neighboring departments. And nevertheless, the next day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the battery reignited. Luckily, the fire department was on scene. They were informed. But right now, having some random guy driving down the freeway, identifying that's not the most efficient way for us to get the communication across the multiple fire authorities and multiple law enforcement agencies and multiple communities and counties to be aware of where the hazards are for these.
Yeah, and they didn't have any type of apparatus following that damaged trailer, did they? It was just the tow trucks?
That's correct. It was just the tow truck. So the truck and they ended up actually having a tractor towing the trailer. It was still at least mobile enough for them to transport it that way. And then they had at least a class 3 wrecker at the front and a class 3 wrecker behind. No fire apparatus. And that's a difficulty right there. Once again, when you start talking to fire departments, do we want a fire department or a fire department apparatus transporting or escorting this tow like they did down in South Metro, Colorado with the damaged EVs back in January? Well, we're crossing 6 jurisdictional boundaries for fire departments. Is it the authority of the first agency to continue the whole way, or do they end up handing off to the next fire department as they go through? In my county, with one of our teams, we're having discussions on, do we do a handoff, or do we just end up having it with that one individual agency while they drive through 3 other agencies? And that's going to be up to authorities having jurisdiction to make that decision. But it's important to have that discussion before it happens, so then we know what the plan could be or should be, instead of just making up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right. I really think the best way to do it is to have some type of handoff, because being able to hand it off, at least now that jurisdiction knows that they've got these damaged batteries going through their jurisdiction.
Yes, and I think that's one of the big things that does have to happen with these batteries, and especially if they're damaged. If they've been known to be fire damaged, just like EVs, if it's been known to be fire damaged, we do know that there's a critical time for these things to potentially reignite up to days or weeks later. But those first few days are a very, very significant and critical time for those batteries to reignite. And if those fire departments of those neighboring agencies or the fire departments of the highways or thoroughfares that these batteries, these fire impinged damaged batteries are going through, if they're not aware, those responders are going to be caught off guard thinking it's just another semi-truck fire. So it comes on down to making sure that we do have,
right.
And I think that's the biggest thing in all the conversations that you and I have had previously, Patrick, is if anything, we need to have better discussion and communication between fire departments, between emergency management, between law enforcement, between the ecology representatives, between cleaners. Every single step of the way needs to have communication. We need to know what's going on, because this is a different game than an ICE vehicle, a gasoline or a diesel type of vehicle. These are different types of hazards that can reignite at any time, and we have to be aware of that potential hazard and that it's a different type of firefight than a traditional structure fire.
Right. And there's a lot of people that think that lithium-ion batteries are like any of the other hazards that we have dealt with over the last 10, 20, 50 years. But realistically, this is a whole different animal where you think you have the fire out, man, it really isn't. You can have a deflagration hazard. There's just a lot of additional risk involved because it is a self-oxidizing chemical reaction. So that's where the struggle really is.
I agree wholeheartedly. And it is that potential reignition and thermal runaway that kind of puts it more into the hazmat background. That's why I've gotten a little bit into it. But batteries are not hazmat, and I will state that all the time, up and down. They do have a potential hazmat component during the cleanup, but you are correct. This is a different beast than any other type of hazardous materials or structural firefighting or traditional firefighting event. That when we put the fire out, unless we didn't put out a tiny little ember or ash, we're not going to have a rekindle. It's almost guaranteed. I wouldn't see every single time, but there's a very, very high likelihood when you extinguish this large of amount of batteries, there's a very high likelihood for a rekindle. And then the question comes on down to, how do we want to fight this fire, or do we want to fight this fire? We need to remember and go back to those tenets of value, time, and the size for people, for property, and for the environment. Well, what's the value for people if we know that it's already ignited? We usually isolate it according to SAE standards, and that's the biggest thing that a lot of the wrecking yards are getting trained up on right now, of making sure that these batteries are put into an isolated area. So that's second time that it reignites at an empty yard in an industrial area, and there's no other hazard of people or property. The only thing right now that we're protecting is the environment. And one of the conversations I've been having with Provident Insurance, I'll be talking to them, is, do we let it burn, or do we aggressively extinguish it? Going back to the beginning of what you just said right there, that we have to treat this differently. Maybe we do not want to put these fires out initially every single time. It may be better just to let it burn. That's going to be a tactical decision up to the incident commander, but those plans and those discussions need to take place before the calls come out.
It's highly dependent on the location of the fire too, and that's another big struggle. There's no one size fits all solution right now. And we still have to do a lot of study in this area to really understand what's going on. Going back to the original incident, it's been days since that trailer was moved to the salvage yard, and those batteries are still on board. Very likely still a hazard involved with this whole situation.
Well, there absolutely is right now, Patrick. The trailer's still sitting in a wrecking yard. This is only as of a few days ago. I don't know if it's rekindled over the last 2 days or so. And obviously the cleanup and the remediation needs to occur between the tow company, between the shipper, and of course the fire department needs to at least be aware, as well as the community members of the LEPCs, emergency management, and ecology, to make sure that it's done safely and properly. And we're starting to see OSHA starting to fine agencies for this. So right now there's still more to come. There's a lot of after actions coming. The biggest failure that I think that happened from this, luckily no firefighters got hurt, nor no civilians got hurt. But we ended up having a lot of undue risk because of a lack of knowledge from all parties, and the communication chain breaking down of the fire department asking for some support from some other members and them denying the support because it wasn't framed appropriately enough and properly enough to bring in other support right now. So once again, back at that federal and that state level, where funding that we typically see in the hazmat realm, it's not trickling down into the battery realm. So who is the ultimate authority having jurisdiction? Who is the ultimate responsible party? Well, that responsible party may be dead, or that responsible party has disappeared. Who's going to pay for this cleanup? Because cleanup of these batteries are very costly. And it takes a long time to remediate the environment and the area around it. So my hat's off to the crews that ended up responding to each of the fires in each of the jurisdictions, as well as everybody else. They were doing what they could with the tools that they had. Unfortunately, right now, the training is not out there for them to know completely how to address each of these hazards. And I want to thank you personally for the work that you're doing here with this channel to provide people of all walks of life the information, not just firefighters, but all responders, first responders, second responders, total law enforcement, ecology, emergency management. We're helping get that word out, and that's what's needed for this new and emerging hazard.
Continuing to learn and training is really important. And that's why I became a fire instructor, because I wanted to share my knowledge, but I also wanted to keep learning, keep up with the new trends. I really recommend you check out Chris's website, hazmatandrescue.com. We're both in the same area. He's more on the hazmat side, but we both offer battery courses on lithium-ion batteries. And whether you take my course or his or both, you're going to get something different out of each class you take. Thanks again for taking the time to talk about this incident, and stay safe out there.